If you are under 1,000 in chess.com rapid ratings, I have a tip for you. In this video, I am going to give advice for every single rating level from 100 all the way up to 1,000, again, in chess.com rapid ratings that will hopefully help propel you to the next level. Now, obviously, just one tip is not going to help your chess skyrocket overnight. Of course, you need to actually put in the work and improve your floor of skills before your ceiling can also improve. I may get to your rating level and you may already know the piece of advice that I have given. This doesn't mean that somehow you should be a higher rating level. That means that there's probably something else in your game that is preventing you from improving. So without further ado, let's get into the video. If you are in the 100 rating range, you need to learn or brush up on all of the basic rules of chess. So for example, you need to learn what check is. Check is where the king is being attacked by an opponent's piece. You need to learn what checkmate is. That's where the king is being attacked, but it has no way to get out of that check. You need to learn what stalemate is. That's where the king is not in check, but if it's your turn and you don't have any legal moves and your king is not in check, that's a stalemate and that's a draw. You need to learn what castling is. You need to learn what en passant is. You need to learn what pawn promotion is. If any of these things sound unfamiliar, this is something that should be in any how to play chess guide that you can find online. Brush up on all these rules. It's very important to know all of the rules so that you can properly progress and play the game. If you're in the 200 rating range, now it's time to learn kind of the next level basics. So piece values. Pawns are worth 1 point, knights and bishops are worth 3, rooks are worth 5 points, the queen is worth 9, and the king is priceless because if you lose the king, you lose the game. So all of that will come into play when you're deciding how to trade pieces while you're playing a game. Another good thing to learn at this level is the concept of CPR. So this is the way that you escape a check. If your opponent is putting you in check, C stands for capture. You can capture the piece that is putting you in check. Protect means basically to block. So if you're in check, you can block with another piece. Or run away. So obviously moving your king out of the check. So you should consider all of these options when your king is in check because often one is better than another. If you are in the 300 rating range, my tip for you is when you're about to move a piece to a square, look at where your opponent's pieces are looking at and make sure that you are not going to be giving your piece away for free. So make sure that that square is safe for you to move your piece to. If there is a piece of lesser value that is looking at that square, you probably aren't going to want to move that piece to that square. So what I mean by that is in this position, black played the move rook d6. So this is giving up the rook two different ways. A rook, again, is worth 5, pawns are worth 1, bishops are worth 3. You don't want to give up one of your higher value pieces for a lower value piece. And I think specifically the way that pawns capture can also be kind of a blindness for folks at this level. And this game proves that because the player with white here captured with the bishop rather than with the pawn. So if your opponent does happen to give you free stuff, try and get as much value as you can out of that free stuff. But most importantly, once again, before you put a piece on a square, make sure that that square is safe. If you're in the 400 rating range, I want you to learn basic opening principles. You can dabble in some different openings, but at this level, you really just need to learn your principles. So what is that? That's 3 things. Control the center with your pawns and pieces, develop your minor pieces, and then get your king to safety. So in a perfect world, that's going to look something like this. You're going to put 2 pawns in the center if possible. Most of the time, this isn't going to be possible, but at least 1 pawn in the center. You're going to want to develop your minor pieces. That's your knights and your bishops. Put them on strong squares. And then you want to castle, get your king to safety. Unless your opponent starts attacking you, obviously you need to respond to whatever threats they're making so that you don't suddenly lose material or something. But this is kind of the dream scenario. It's also important when I talk about developing pieces that you are not moving any of these pieces twice before you move each of them once. So that helps you get all of your pieces out into the party so that you can use all those pieces. You need a full army to actually go on the attack. You can't just attack with one single knight. That's just not going to work. If you are in the 500 rating range, you need to work on simplification. So that means if you are up a piece, for example, if you're up some kind of material, do your best to try and trade off all of your other pieces because then in the endgame, you're just going to be left with that extra piece that you have. So the easiest way to understand this is imagine that you are up a queen. You just have an extra queen and your opponent does it. Well, if you are able to trade off all of the remaining pieces, so you trade off these rooks, trade off some knights, trade off some bishops, trade off some other bishops, trade off these knights, and trade off these rooks, which side would you rather have in this position? Obviously, you'd rather have the side with the extra queen. The way this works in a real game is that you want to force trades as much as possible, because if your opponent is allowed to keep more pieces on the board, that means they're going to have more chances to swindle and find some strong checkmates or try and win the material back that they've already lost. If you can just force all of your opponent's pieces off the board, then again, you're just going to be left with the extra material that you are up, and it should be easy for you to continue to win that game. If you are in the 600 rating range, I want you to really work on your checkmate patterns. So your checkmates in ones, checkmates in twos. The best way to do this is by doing a lot of puzzles. So you can do this in Puzzle Rush. There's lots of other resources for puzzles like this. But for example, you need to learn like the back rank checkmate. You're going to see a lot of these at this level. That's where you bring one of your long range pieces all the way up and you checkmate like this. You need to learn what I call the bump back checkmate. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's where you give a check like this, force the king back, and then you basically do the same thing with the back rank checkmate with just a few more steps. You need to learn things like the in-your-face checkmate, which is where the queen comes up and it's protected by another one of your pieces, and it's checkmating the king like this. Another thing that kind of goes along with all of these checkmates is the concept of a luft, which is where you're going to push one of your pawns so that it's preventing your opponent from coming down and giving you the back rank checkmate. Obviously, we've already won this game, but if the rook were to try and come down, we would have an escape square like this. So this kind of a pawn move, either this one or this one, is something that you can consider earlier in the game just to avoid the back rank checkmate threats that your opponent might have. If you are in the 700 rating range, this is a good time to learn and perfect all of the empty board checkmates. So all the checkmates that you do when there are no other pieces on the board, but you just have some major pieces left. So the stepladder technique with, 2 or more queens or queen and a rook. You can also do it with 2 rooks. You should learn the single rook checkmate. That's probably the toughest one out of all of these. You should also learn the single queen checkmate as well. And if you already know all of these, most likely at this level, it's going to be something that you need to think about. Like you need to spend a few seconds on every move to make sure you're doing it right. This is a good time to really drill them so you can get to the point where you can basically pre-move all of these checkmates. And the reason I say that is just 100% for your own confidence. You want to be able to, in some kind of time pressure, be able to be confident that you are going to win a game when you are up a rook, when you are up a queen. When you have these extra pieces, you don't want to be just shuffling your pieces around. You want to know exactly what you're doing so you can win the full game. If you are in the 800 rating range, I have 2 tips for you. Stop pushing pawns forward for no reason, and also take free stuff. I was looking through a ton of games to make this video and make sure everything was like accurate to the rating ranges that I'm talking about, and so many of the games in this level, one person would just move a piece to a square where their piece could be captured, and then the other person just wouldn't capture it. So don't just trust your opponent that they're making the best moves. If you can take one of their pieces, just take it. Also, if you're not sure what to do, a lot of people at this level will just push a pawn, like I did in this game. This is a bad move for a few reasons. Number 1, my opponent can give a check, which is what they did in the game. And number 2, there's ideas with pushing forward and trying to fork my pieces like this. So just pushing this pawn when it was actually doing a nice job of protecting against any checks against my king here, there's no reason to do that, especially because, going along with the second part of these tips, we just have a free piece. We can move our rook over and there's nowhere for that knight to go. It's completely trapped. None of these squares are safe for the knight to escape to, and we're going to win it on the next move. If you are in the 900 rating range, this is a very important time to start being more hyper aware of what your opponent wants. So whenever your opponent makes a move, I want you to start asking yourself, what does that move do? What do they want? What are they threatening? And if they're threatening a piece, or if they're threatening checkmate, you need to find a way to stop it, stop the most pressing threat. So in this position, white played the move knight c6, and I thought, well, okay, my opponent's just giving me a free knight. But whenever a piece moves, that also opens up lines for other pieces to see across the board, And importantly here in this position, my opponent is now threatening this battery checkmate. So once I captured the knight, my opponent just won the game, just one move later. So instead, I needed to ignore this threat for now and simply move my queen back to defend this square where my opponent was threatening checkmate. Obviously, I don't want to lose the game. I would rather lose a rook than just lose the game in one move. So these are the kinds of things that even if your opponent is making what seems like a silly move, you should be asking yourself, okay, is there actually a reason for this move, or are they actually just giving up material? If you're in the 1000 rating range, this is the time I would recommend to settle on an opening. Now, this doesn't mean that you can never switch up your opening repertoire ever again, or even just like play around with different openings. But I think this is a good time to really solidify your repertoire, meaning go a little bit more in depth into one opening with white and one opening with black, just to the extent that you feel comfortable out of the opening phase of the game, because this is going to give you familiar positions rather than you having to spend a lot of time thinking about what to do in the opening phase. You will actually recognize the kinds of positions that you're getting yourself into and understand the plans that you want to go for so that you can get into these stronger middle games and end game phases, because you want to improve at all levels, at all phases of the game. And I promise that settling on an opening and learning a little bit deeper into that opening is going to help you do that. I hope these tips helped you, and if you've got any more tips to share for players who are below the level that you're currently at, I would highly encourage you to share those in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out a lot. I'll see you soon.